Hi, Lou here to talk about entirely random games and why you would design such things. Usual caveat, this is something to be listened to rather than read. The slides are very wordy for people who are hearing impaired. You've probably seen random games. Chutes and Ladders is a traditional random game, so is Candyland, which is a good learning experience for little kids. LCR, which is left, center, right, which is even played by adults, is a random game. We could add some video games as well. Drinking games are often entirely random because they're just an excuse to drink. Now, I'm not against randomness or uncertainty in itself. Games benefit from some uncertainty. When there's no uncertainty, other than the intentions of a single other player, you usually have a puzzle, not a game. Chess, for example, is too complex to be fully solved by humans, but it's a puzzle nonetheless. Uncertainty provides surprise, which is an essential element of games. Even in perfect information games with no randomness like chess, you can be surprised by the other player. But there's much less surprise in a single player or co-op game, which is why single-player games without uncertainty will often be played only once. What's the fascination, though, with entirely random games? Well, we could ask the same about gambling, and I confess I've never gambled. Except in most gambling, there's a bias in favor of the house. That is, you know you're going to lose in the long run. In a typical random game, you've got just as much chance as anybody else. Well, I like to watch people play games, but I find random games uninteresting to watch because there's no change in how things happen or what happens. In fact, nothing really happens at all, and no one learns anything at all, whereas good games involve a learning experience, if only learning to play the game better. Perhaps then entirely random games are more akin to gambling than to spectator sport, so I shouldn't expect to be able to watch and enjoy them. These games might be called irresponsible games insofar as the player has no responsibility for what happens, or perhaps a more neutral name would be not my fault games. They are necessarily abstract. What happens and why it happens makes no particular sense outside the game. It just is. The game doesn't represent or model anything, whatever trappings or decoration might be involved, unless it models something that's entirely random, of course. So why bother? Not only why bother to play, but especially why bother to design? Games involve interesting decisions, as Sid Meier put it. Why would a game designer bother to design a game that has no decisions that mean anything, and consequently no interesting decisions, because it's entirely random? The closest thing to a challenge in designing a random game is coming up with one that's interesting despite the randomness. And yet again, we can look at the success of LCR, which is stultifyingly dull and uninteresting, but people buy it. So, except as a design challenge, I don't see the point of trying to design an entirely random game. Thanks for listening.